I'm so excited for this episode. I don't even know where to start. So this is a really juicy one where we get to dive into topics like sex magic, relationships, manifesting, understanding how to tap into your goddess, feminine, divine energy and what that really means. So we just take it to a whole another juicy level. So I'm really pumped about this. When I started the Goddess Collective, I knew that I loved the words goddess collective. I knew I loved them and that the vibration of those words really sat well with me. And they've been words that kind of have been following me throughout my life. But I also at the same time knew that I didn't fully understand the definition of those words. And I had a feeling that that was going to start to form as I dove into the subject deeper and just allowed it to just birth into whatever it was supposed to be. And I'm loving that, today the definition of that is really being mirrored back to me through the conversations that I'm having with incredible women. And today's conversation is literally no exception to that. And it's probably the most like juicy one I've had in regards to understanding what your divine feminine energy is, your goddess energy, and how to use that to empower your life and to see yourself as magical. There's so much we dive into here. So I can't wait for you to listen to the episode. It's me and Carole Kennelly. She used to own her own branding consultancy, and now she runs, plant medicine retreats, and she's just come into this new place within her life and herself. And it's so fun to connect with her and get to understand her world as she's evolved into it a bit more. So I can't wait to, hear what you guys take away from this, what you enjoy about this conversation, and any feedback. Is there any subjects you want us to dive deeper into? Because I will be having her back on the show. I just know it. So enjoy the episode. Let us know what you think. And use this episode, the energy of this episode, really use it to ask yourself, how can I tap in deeper into my own goddess energy, my own gifts moving forward, and see what that could evolve for you, as you go about your day, your week, and life. Carole, hi, how are you doing?
Hello, I am fantastic. Thank you for having me here today.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited because we just have some really juicy stuff to dive into today. And I think we both talked about how, because we've had a chance to talk about, your background a little bit and what you're doing now. So we'll dive into that. But kind of where our relationship is, like our friendship has gone so far, is like it's allowed us to just have a safe space to dive into some even juicier conversations around like femininity and feminine power and just like pleasure and all these things. So I can't wait to dive in. I think we've got a really good session. So I want to thank you for being here, joining the Goddess Collective podcast. So intro yourself in for anybody that is new to the show or new to you and your content. Tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe your past life before you did what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Carole Kennelly, and this is so funny to do an introduction because I am formally a coach. I am formally I was running a branding agency for coaches. And when you ask about my content, I was formerly a content creator. And in my new life, I have not created content. I have not done any of those things. I've definitely gotten off of the treadmill of just constant content creation. But yeah, so now I went through what I like to refer to as the beautiful destruction of my life, where I basically took everything that was on top of the table and flipped it upside down and decided to kind of rebuild, but rebuild from a place of total like feminine alignment, where I'm just completely in flow with what it is that I'm meant to be doing. And with that, I mean, it's really just become like a new way of living. So that is me. I'm now like, the work that I do is really, I bring women to visionary plant medicine. And I am hosting my first retreat in a couple of weeks. But I gave up all of the coaching to step into this calling. So here I am.
Oh my gosh. Well, you just say everything so gracefully, because I think about my own evolution and it's like thinking about like, okay, yeah, like flipping the tables. No, that is like some of the messiest, scariest times ever. So to just hear you, you're so graceful and to see how you've just kind of blossomed into like what you're doing now is amazing. So tell us a little bit about that shift and that evolution going from, I know you were doing like, you had a brand consulting agency and you've owned a couple of businesses now, and now you've gone more, I would say probably it sounds like more of like the spiritual realm, right?
Oh,
So
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, I never want to define things for people, but I'm like, I definitely feel like that's the sense that I get. So tell us about the shift that you made, mentally, internally to pivot into that side of things. And do you feel more aligned now than ever before, or is it
Oh
just
my
a
gosh.
shift? Such a loaded question.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I pretty much, I like to credit this big like shift in my life to, it really came about after I discovered the women's work. And by the women's work, I mean, work around, I mean, sort of like goddess empowerment work, or I mean, the work of Regina Thomasschauer or Layla Martin, really learning about how to tap into feminine power, um, how to tap into like the power that comes from pleasure, and really just learning about these sacred practices that have really been hidden away from women for many, many, many generations. Like reading about just like ancient manifestation techniques that have existed for thousands of years that women were not taught about. So when I say that, like, this is how like I flipped my life upside down is I actually went into a program that was focused around this. And that's where I learned about the idea of like living your life on the spot. And so what does it mean to live your life on the spot? Well,
I love that.
If you want to like liken it to like your sexual pleasure, like we all have the spot. We all have a spot that is like our spot of like most intense pleasure that also can like very quickly become like that spot of intense pain. Living your life in that place, it's like, it's kind of a scary place to be, but it's like, it's equal parts scary and exciting. Now, like when I go into my daily meditations, I ask myself, like, am I living on the spot? Like, what would be the most on the spot thing for me to be focusing on this week or today, or, whatever it is that I'm setting my intention for, and really leading my decision-making based on what my body is telling me, like what lights me up physically, like on the inside. Yeah. And I know that sounds like batshit crazy. I get that. But that has been like what I credit like this complete shift in my life to, has like really learning to listen to my inner wisdom.
Oh my gosh. No, to me, it doesn't sound batshit at all. This sound like, for me, this is like like the conversations I love to have, and it's like normal. And what I love about everything you've shared is like, you're normalizing the idea of manifesting and tapping into our power. And I feel like it's something that so many women in general in today's world are asleep to. And that's why I think these conversations should be normalized. But also, I love that we just kind of went there. We just kind of went right in, because this is what creates, I think, lives that people, especially women, are crazy about and love. And so I something I've been diving into personally is this idea that, manifestation is actually not woo-woo. It's actually like the way of the world. And this is actually some of the first time I think I've like vocalized this. So I don't know exactly how this is going to come out, but I really feel like it's almost like we've been told that manifestation is crazy and woo-woo and whatever, because it's actually super powerful. And it's actually not that hard to tap into. It just takes knowing yourself. So with your retreats, kind of backtracking a little bit, do you like, are a lot of your retreats centered around kind of diving into how to harness that manifestation within yourself by connecting to your body, or are there different modalities that you kind of do to get there?
So like, to be clear, like the retreats that I'm hosting at the present time, they are visionary plant medicine retreats. And so I like to, like, I can't take any credit because the plants are the teachers. The plants are there to show us what we need to see. And a lot of that is, in these experiences, we're able to connect more deeply with our intuition and more deeply with our creativity. And from the time these retreats end, that's really where the work begins, because the work then is learning to develop a practice that continues to strengthen that connection with your intuition and strengthen that connection with spirit and with creativity, and becoming like an open vessel for all of spirit to flow through us. And that means, being open to like the guidance that's coming, that oftentimes we ignore because maybe it doesn't make sense, or maybe it feels a little woo-woo or whatever, or maybe that guidance is telling us to flip the table upside down, and that doesn't make sense to our ego because our ego wants to hold so tightly onto the identity that, or the identities that we've created for ourselves over our lifetime. So yeah, the work that we do really is about, it's like we invite people in who are ready to like be open to what will it look like if you really did like go through your own process of beautiful destruction, where you're tearing down the things that are no longer serving you, or the things that you built strictly out of like sort of performative behavior, like proving your worthiness, hustling for your worthiness, you know, having the world validate you, the external world validate you based on, you know, the degrees that you have, the certifications you have, like all of the things that you've earned and accomplished. Like, what does it look like if you were really able to let all of that go? Like, and realize that that is not what makes you who you are. That is what you've done. It's what you do, but it doesn't define who you are. And in a lot of cases, if it's no longer aligned, it's actually the thing that's blocking you from having that open channel to intuition, to spirit, to creativity, to manifestation.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. And it's amazing to me how many people I think don't feel like they have the time to do this work. Because when you dive in, it's almost like you don't not have the time, because this will expedite so much for you, right? And like connecting deep within yourself. I have so many questions because I love this. I love this topic, and we're definitely going off script here, but I think that like, I don't know. I think that this topic is so important. And I really want it to like have center stage here. Because I really feel like when you connect with yourself and you start to understand yourself deeper, that's when the game changes, and you start to do kind of what we were talking about before we started recording, was just you start to slow down and you start to be able to bring in all the things that you want. And I was kind of thinking when you were chatting a bit just now, when you were saying sometimes with manifesting, like we're going to be told to like flip the table upside down. We're going to be told like to do crazy things, right? Like, how do you trust and just move when you get things that maybe are super illogical coming in, right? It might be like, no, there's no way I can do that. Or like that pivot makes no sense. Like how do you decipher?
Yeah.
Just
Well, I mean, you have to ask yourself, what kind of life do you really want to live? And if someone were to have told me a year ago that I would be sitting here talking to you about manifesting through like, you know, plant medicine retreats and self-pleasure practices, I would have said, absolutely not. I would never, ever in a million years, like get on a microphone and talk about my self-pleasure practice or about plant medicine. That was like a secret, like, oh no, we don't talk about that. And here I am today. My life is completely different. Like, it's really like, the thing is I was holding on so tightly to that identity that I had built. And that identity was all about proving to everybody how successful I could be, proving to my family, proving to my, you know, colleagues and coworkers and, you know, people from graduate school, like proving that I was good enough. When really at the end of the day, the only person that matters is yourself. And so my truth was that I was unhappy. I was deeply unhappy because everything I was doing was for the wrong reason. And it was all to show everyone else. Like, we all just want validation. We all just want to feel worthy. And so when I was ready to finally face that and say, you know what, it's time to let that go. I mean, that was when my world started shifting. Not to say like overnight, everything has been like all sunshine and rainbows, but I no longer have to create content. I no longer have to think about what am I putting on social media? What story am I telling today? All the time I spent doing all the things that we do as coaches and as business owners, I don't do that anymore. And the like freedom that comes from that feels really amazing.
Yeah. So that's amazing. And then I think about, you know, people like myself and other entrepreneurs who are kind of just getting started, hearing something like that. And it feels like, oh my God, that's such a dream. I can't wait for that one day. But something that I think about a lot of times when I listen to like personal development content or anything that like from like, you know, I love to listen to content from like multiple 7-figure earners to just see how they think. You know, I even just went to a business conference in a room that I technically, air quotes, wasn't supposed to be in because I wasn't a 7-figure earner yet. But I was like, I just want to put myself in the room. And something that I do is I just like to see, okay, what are their mindsets? And this idea of quantum leap. How about instead of me feeling like I have to wait to take that in, why don't I just adopt that philosophy now? Right. And so I almost wonder if, if I could just, myself and anybody else listening that is feeling like, oh, we are kind of, we have to do the hamster wheel social media thing. What if we just decided that we were safe and we were enough? And what kind of creativity could that unravel so that we could do it our own way and do it a different way? So now I'm just like starting to think about my own processes a little bit different. And so it's just interesting.
I would say for me, the biggest shift, anytime I look, like you're like making me like look back at different times in my business when, I've had some really, really phenomenal success that I'm really grateful for. But the times that I was the most successful was when I was not focused on what I needed to do, but where I was more focused on who I needed to be. And I know that sounds cliche. That sounds like, ooh, who do you need to be? But really it's when you decide, I have something to say, this is my expertise, this is my lane, and I'm going to stand in it and like ride it all the way through and not worry about who else is in that lane or who else is talking about the same things or who else is judging you or, whatever. When you just really speak from who it is that you're meant to be and tell your story from a real, authentic, aligned place, like that energy is what attracts what it is that you want. So when I've been there, I've been in that place where I start seeing like, oh, everybody else is doing this, so I got to do this too. Those are the moments when I would fall off course. Those would be the moments where I would struggle to get clients or struggle with visibility or feel like my content was forced. And it was all because I like suddenly paid attention to what everyone else is doing. If I just paid attention to what I was doing and being who I was meant to be, everything flowed so much easier and still does.
Yeah, I love that because I feel like the biggest aha moments are always like the simplest. And it's funny because sometimes I hear that and it does sound cheesy, but when you say it, for some reason I hear it different. I'm like, no, that's so authentic and real. And it just makes me think about how, the more I kind of lost what I was gonna say in my mind, but I just think it's really powerful to know like you can never do it wrong. And also, this is also why I think that we can't look at like our current ways of being and how we like, well, we want to do it different. We can't look at it and be upset, right? Because then we're like, well, anytime I ever have made big change in my life where it felt more empowering, it's because I usually hit a point of like, I put my hands in there. I was like, fuck, I can't do this anymore. Like I have to do it in a way that feels that like, you experience the contrast so much that you're like, okay, I just want to do it different. So if you didn't have the contrast of the doing it the way that maybe didn't feel aligned, you wouldn't know what did feel good and what you actually wanted instead. So it's appreciating those things, right? And allowing that to be kind of your inspiration. Once you hit like sometimes it takes hitting a breaking point, but I don't think it always has to get there, but there is always, regardless, going to be that appreciation because you see the difference.
Yeah. So, I firmly believe the whole, like that feeling of throwing the noodles at the wall to see what sticks. I feel like that is just part of the process. And then someday you get to the place where you look back and you're like, oh, look at that sweet girl that's just throwing all those noodles at the wall. She's trying so hard. You find a place of deep love for every stage of your journey. I have like, even though there's moments when I look back at like some of my video content, whatever, I'm like a little embarrassed about it. There's also this other part of me that I have deep appreciation because that version of me really was going for it. She was putting herself out there. She was trying really, whether the energy behind it was aligned or not, she was trying. And that is something to be celebrated. And I mean, any new coach out there who's trying to get visible, fuck yeah, celebrate that. Like, putting yourself out there is the best way to figure out what way to go, what direction you need to go, where your alignment is.
Oh my gosh, you know what? And it's also some of the best way to just visually see your growth. I think about some of like the first videos I did when I was like putting my mission out there. This is back when I still had an interior design business. I was like, because I knew that wasn't really what I wanted to do, but I was like, I got to start. So I was just going to start this thing that I do like. But anyways, I made these videos. I would go live and whatever. And it was just so cringeworthy. Like it was so cringy, but I showed up and I did it. And I look back and I always thought I would look back and be embarrassed or I just wouldn't want to look back. But not saying that I'm, the world's best person on camera by any means, but it is cool to see, wow, like just what consistent action can do, just putting yourself out there, being willing, believing in yourself enough to just try. Over time, you're like, I don't even recognize that person anymore. Because you put yourself in the arena, as Brene Brown says, like you put yourself in there, and then you can really see the expansion because you're now in, you're now a year later or whatever. So it's a really cool thing to do. Even if you just want to see, like, you just want to acknowledge yourself, like, am I even growing? Like, because sometimes, it feels like nothing's happening, but it's only because we don't have any perspective on it, because we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to see that perspective. So that's just one example, right? Video, but anything, like you could look at your writing. You can look at, your friendships, your relationships, and the growth with them over time. There's ways to dive in. But I kind of want to shift gears a little bit, although I think it is aligned. I want to talk about ego for a second, because I think part of this, if not all of this, really is talking about, our protection mechanisms for ourselves to feel safe. And so again, it's just meeting ourselves where we're at. But I'm curious on your definition of ego, or thoughts on ego, and kind of your relationship with it now, because you've obviously evolved into, a new place within yourself. So how has that relationship with ego changed?
Well, so first of all, like anybody who says like, oh, like I'm going to like demolish my ego, or I'm going to ascend above my ego, like I think that's kind of a load of shit, because your ego is necessary. Your ego keeps you safe. Your ego has a very specific job.
Yeah, man.
And like maybe that job isn't always the most helpful, especially when fear is involved, but your ego, it's like your best buddy. I think it was Liz Gilbert talks about fear, and how fear is always going to be a part of the creative process. It's always going to be a part of any entrepreneurial process. And instead of saying like, okay, fear, get out of here, saying like, you know what, fear always has room, like has a seat in the car, for example. But fear is never allowed to drive the car. Like you can come along for the ride, you just don't get to take the wheel. And so that's kind of my relationship with ego, where your ego is always going to be there. It's, it's always going to be doing its thing. Your ego can, sometimes just be a bit of an obnoxious prick, but she's there. And so like learning to make friends with it, learning to love that version of yourself that later you're like, oh, I'm so embarrassed that I acted that way. Like knowing like, okay, that wasn't fully me. That was my ego stepping in, trying to like establish authority or dominance, trying to, whatever the fuck your ego is doing in that moment. It's all there to be witnessed, observed, and in my opinion, to learn how to love all parts of yourself. Like you can't just like shove your ego in the closet and like carry on with life. You've got to learn to love all those parts of yourself that come up, especially expressed through ego.
Yeah, I love that so much. And, I think something I struggled with for a long time was just understanding that you can love all parts of yourself. And I mean, I think it's life work, right? Like and definitely there's still parts that I'm working on. But what I found is an easier way to do that. Cause I'm always like, well, how do you actually do that if you really don't feel like you love yourself, but you need to do that in order to go where you want to go? I just started acknowledging my real underlying truth. Like, for example, recently I was it was like I was triggered by like a past thing with like relationships. And in my current relationship, he didn't do anything, but my own, past stuff came up. And I realized I was feeling really, really attached or really afraid of losing him or whatever, all of a sudden. And when I dug into it, I really clicked in, because I know how to do the work at this point, but I clicked into, oh my gosh, this is abandonment. This is a fear of abandonment. And I swear I'm going to bring this back around. It was like this feeling of abandonment. And then it was weird because I wasn't proud of that, but I like sat there and I really owned that that's how I felt. And I like actually said it out loud with no shame. I was just like, whoa, this is what's been hiding under the surface for so many years. And I never had the words. And now all of a sudden I had the words. And then from there, what I did was I just said out loud. And this was the scariest part, is I actually had a conversation with my boyfriend. And I was like, you might think I'm crazy, but I need to tell you that when this happened, this thing came up and actually showed me that I have a fear of abandonment. And I'm not telling you this because I want you to do anything. I'm telling you this because my intention is to get this shit out. I'm trying to dissolve this out of me because I don't want to feel this anymore. But the answers just came up. And now I don't feel any of that sensation anymore. Like it actually made us closer and stronger. And it was because I owned how I was feeling. And when I could own the truth of my emotions on something that I felt like was a really ugly part of me, it went away. It literally went away. And I was like, whoa, okay, not that I love that component of, or that characteristic or that piece of, my ego trying to protect me, but now I understand it. And I understand it. And so because I understand that that was an underlying thing that's been sitting there, I can let it go with love.
Yeah.
So it's not always about,
From somewhere.
it's not always about loving the thing, but it's being willing to understand it so that you can release it so it doesn't have to be part of you anymore. So when I started tapping into that journey with things within myself, that's when I think the game has been changing the most.
I mean, what I'm hearing you talk about is shadow work, where it's like we keep these sides of ourselves hidden. And it's not until we bring those hidden parts of ourselves into the light, acknowledge them. And for me, my process does involve like finding a way to love that part of myself, so that I can release it. It's really about self-acceptance at the end of the day, because we all have things like that come up, and it's not our fault. It's not our fault that we have abandonment issues that stem back from, I mean, it might not even be from our own lived experience. It might be something that was passed on us from a parent who grew up with abandonment issues. Like, you never know where it's hard to find the core of some of this, but the important part is being able to actually see it. And exactly what you just said, like bring it into the light, like talk about it, own it. Don't place blame. Don't put yourself in a victim situation around it, but just say like, this is a thing. I'm noticing it. It has nothing to do with you. And like, I just want you to share in this experience with me so you know me deeper. And it creates intimacy.
And there was something about it where I was like, wow, I just feel really seen and witnessed right now. And it was almost like I needed that. I needed to feel so understood by the person that I was the most afraid to share it with. And then to realize that it actually wasn't a big deal, and it actually made him respect me more and made us even closer. So it was like the best thing that could have ever happened, while also getting to dissolve this part of me that I didn't want there anymore. But this is the importance of like working with coaches and going to, in-person experiences like retreats and things, because it allows you to do the work so that when this stuff comes up, you know what to do and how to handle it, and you feel free.
A lot of this women's work that I talk about, it's about softening. It's about softening into who it is that we really are, rather than like hustling and muscling our way to uphold this identity of who we think we need to be. And it shows up not only professionally, it shows up in our relationships where, we have so much programming of like, what does it mean to be a good partner, a good girlfriend, a good wife, all of those things. And there are people out there spreading so many toxic messages of, that would tell you, they would give you the really terrible advice to deal with that on your own, and not to share that, not to scare him away with your like abandonment issues. That is, in my opinion, just so toxic for relationships in general, because until you can actually like really connect about what's real and what's true and what's authentic for you, like you guys are going to be playing out this same cycle over and over and over again until it's healed.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I will say too, it really takes the right partner, I think, to get to a place where you're like, you know what, I'm going to face this. And I'm not, cause I'm done. Like right before I met him, I had like ended a different relationship a few, months before. And so this all kind of came in really quick, and I was like in a really good place, but I was like, I don't want another relationship already. I was like, don't mess this up for me. You're great, but don't mess this up for me. It was a whole thing. But anyways, I remember when I first met him, before I met him, when my last relationship ended, I was like, you know what? I've had enough. Cause I'm going to be honest here. I'm super vulnerable. I've had 6 relationships that just didn't, they just didn't pan out as I had hoped that they would. And I finally got to this, it was like what I was talking about earlier. I had this breaking point where I was like, you know what? I no longer accept a relationship that just doesn't work. Like I'm just done floating around that. Like I'm ready to just go all in with my the next person that is he's it, because I'm done with this. And what it's allowed me to do is be like really strong and put my ego aside a bit and say, okay, if this is happening, no, I have to take full responsibility. And that's honestly been my catalyst to allow me to just really face some of these things that I just didn't even realize we're still sitting there, or I just didn't want to look at before or whatever. So I think you've got to find, in order to really dive into this work, right, the shadow work, and be willing to come into a new place within yourself, you've got to have a reason that feels compelling enough that if you didn't do the work, the consequence would be too much. And you're like, no, I don't accept that for myself anymore. So it's just getting really decided, and then committing. But yeah, that's a whole other episode on its own. But I just, there's so much relevancy to
I love this topic.
Yeah, because I mean, here's where I'm really excited. Let's get into the sex magic.
Wait, okay, before that, I just want to say, like, for anybody listening, just to remember that our partners are our greatest teachers. Yeah, they are the best tools given to us to really actually learn about who we are and to like heal ourselves. So like our partners will always be showing us where we need to look because they trigger the fuck out of us. And that's just part of being in a relationship. I've been with my husband now for 11 years. We still trigger each other, but we now have the tools to like understand that what's coming up for us when we like find ourselves confronted or annoyed or whatever, it is all our own stuff. And that's where the work begins, is to like be able to look at that and be like, oh, he did this thing, but it has nothing to do with him. Has everything to do with me. And this is where I need to dive deeper. And so I just wanted to say that like when you feel like running, that might be a time to soften and to really like think, okay, like, or if you feel like putting yourself in victim or blaming and being like, but he did this or she did this, whatever it is, those are the moments where you should actually be looking in the mirror. That is my firm belief.
I'm so glad you brought us there, because that is a really important message. And to know, like, even though you heal stuff, right, and you become your strong, like you come into a new level within yourself, it doesn't mean that there's not always going to be work to do. There's always there's always more expansion at every new level that we reach. And so it's amazing to be able to have a partner where you can grow with and experience all of that with and be seen with, or seen by, but at the same time, there definitely can still be those feelings of wanting to run, wanting to, not deal with it, wanting to just escape it, but like you're saying, the moment that comes up, be willing to look inward, and instead of saying, I don't know, I don't want to deal with it, think past that, right? Give yourself the opportunity to trust yourself, to know that you're safe to do the work when it shows itself. And it's scary, right? But it's
really
so
scary. Fun. But here's the thing in doing the work. And I mean, this is a little bit of like personal, sharing my own personal experience, but I remember when I started doing this work, I would get frustrated with my husband because he didn't understand what I was doing. And like, I wanted him so badly to be doing the work with me. And like, I wanted him to join, I had different coaches and mentors and whatnot. I wanted him there by my side. I wanted him to be doing the work with me because otherwise it felt imbalanced or out of balance. And what I will say is when I actually finally surrendered and I just focused on me and started doing the work for myself, before I knew it, he started shifting too. And so sometimes all it takes is like, you really just have to focus on your own stuff. And when you start focusing on your own stuff, the people around you have no choice but to shift because you start showing up differently in relationship. So then they can't enter in at the same, you're not giving them the same entry point for argument or for conflict because you're not available for it anymore once you start shifting and, whatever. So there's a ripple effect to doing this work, whether it's the women's work, like, I know we want to talk a little bit about sex magic, doing, or even like with regards to like, I'm a very sexual person and my husband, he just historically is not, I mean, he's not as adventurous as I have been. Sorry, Dad, if you ever listen to this. Anyway, and
if he's listening to this podcast, I'm very impressed. A love fan.
Yes. Well, it has taken me to really get in touch with my own feminine desire and own it in order for my husband to be able to show up for it in a way that, he felt safe. And a lot of this, I mean, when we talk about sex, a lot of it comes down from it comes from a place of what were you raised with? If you were raised with a lot of shame around sex, like if you were raised Mexican Catholic, there's a lot of guilt and shame around anything sexual. And I mean, anyway, so this is the marriage I'm in where it's like, not to say my husband's not sexual, but he wasn't raised to talk about it. He's not very open about it. It exists within the four walls of our bedroom, but we don't often have conversations over the dinner table about it. So it took me diving into this work and being really true and with myself of what are my desires? What is my feminine desire? What do I really want to bring into our marriage? And being honest about it for things to start to shift.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's,
Yeah.
I know we're all over the place in this conversation.
I know we've literally gone, I don't even know where, I'm like, we've gone everywhere, but
It's all connected.
sometimes these are my favorite podcast episodes. It's just like, let's just chat like girlfriends. Cause this is what my girlfriends and I do. We literally will just sit there and like, we'll just kind of go off on whatever subjects come up and just have deep conversations about it, but I did kind of want to, yeah, it's so juicy. But I did want to touch on just one thing that I was kind of thinking about. And I remember it was actually, so last week I got to go to Vegas for a business conference and I actually brought my boyfriend, and a lot of the time I didn't think he was paying attention because he was just like on his phone doing crypto stuff. And I was like, okay, he's kind of like in his own world, but I was like, but he's here. That means a lot. But I realized the story I was telling myself was that I was learning and he wasn't. But after the sessions, he would ask me, he's like, oh, what'd you take away? Like, do you feel like you grabbed a lot? And I was like, yeah. And I would tell him everything. And then I'd be like, did you grab anything? And he'd be like, well, I thought this part, all these parts were interesting. Like, I actually was kind of thinking about this. I think they could have done this different. So the story that I was creating about myself, or like the situation, was that I was learning and he wasn't. But what I realized from that is that, wait, we're both learning in our own ways and in our own different styles. So just because my style is different than his, it doesn't mean, that we're not both learning in our own, our own ways. So instead of saying like, something that I realized I needed to do is, instead of going into like judgment mode and like, I don't want to say attacking, but almost being like, well, what the hell? I thought you wanted to be part of this with me. And realizing, wait, he's just kind of doing his own thing in a way that he wants. And he's there fully too. So it just, I think that's a really nice way to just think about in life, right? Like not assuming that people aren't growing or learning, just kind of seeing it as a way to ask them and get curious, like, oh, like, what did you take away from that? Not just assuming they didn't, aren't involved. So I don't know.
And also like ask yourself, why is it important for you that he is getting takeaways from this? Like, this is a big lesson for me, is learning to focus on myself and not like, because anytime I'm in a place of judgment, I am disempowering myself. Like, I'm not allowing myself to be the person I want to be and know that I can be and grow into, when I'm focusing on what everybody else is doing. And are they doing enough? Are they, all of that. Like, I am fully guilty of this, but it's like,
so, but it's so, we can't get mad at ourselves. It's like easy to do that, right? It's so easy to sit in that place. But I do want to go back to the sex magic. So excited because right before we hit record, we did start talking about the relationship of, like sex and money and manifesting and what that really is, and creating that relationship. So can you kind of take us a step back and just kind of give us your definition of, or your understanding of kind of what sex magic is about? Because I'm just starting to tap in and I'm really excited about it.
Oh my gosh. Well, first, let me just say, like, I'm sitting here being like, how is this my life right now? How is this my life? Like, hell yes, this is my life right now. Okay. Like, I'm not going to pretend like I am the expert on sex magic. Sex magic came into my life in the last few months, and it really just stems from the fact that we as women are far more powerful than what we've been told. We like, the magic that exists inside us is beyond anything that we can actually comprehend. And it's, once we start developing a relationship with that power, that's really when we start to see things changing in life. And so, like, our bodies are like, we have a barometer, a built-in barometer of like what direction we should go in life. And I think we talked about this a little earlier, about living your life on the spot. But there are many, many, many women who have been taught, who are being trained to like tap in with like yoni magic, in terms of like asking, quote unquote, your pussy, sorry if that offends you, but asking your pussy what it is it wants, and living your life from a pussy pleasure led place. And so what I mean by that is, like, you're like, if pussy is like holding you up, which I will admit, like, that term kind of tripped me up initially when I started doing this work. If that's holding you up, just think about it in terms of your own internal womb, women's wisdom. your body knows the answer to anything you want. Your body is there to guide you. And
Wait,
it's
so our womb and pussy, are those used interchangeably?
pretty much. I mean, like,
okay.
So like, to be like technical, the word vagina is actually limiting. It only refers to like one part of your overall like system down there. So you can refer to it at like vulva is more encompassing. So vulva is more PC, I guess. Yoni, people use yoni a lot. That is also like all encompassing. Regina Thomashow, or Mama Gina, she likes to use the word pussy, first of all, because it gets your attention, but second of all, because it's one of those things where it really talks, when you use that word, it's reclaiming that which has been taken from us. You know, the term pussy is like, there's so much shame attached to it. Like, it's used as a derogatory insult for a lot of men, like, oh, you're such a pussy. But when you get down to it, your pussy is like the most magical, powerful thing that exists. Like, it creates lives, it creates babies, it creates, you know, magic. And it's a portal. It is a portal to the etheric world. And when you start developing a relationship with it in conversation, and by conversation, I mean learning about your pleasure, learning about what your body is trying to tell you, you like clear a channel to where you have more of a direct communication, like a direct line to the spirit, to source, to whatever you want to call it, God, goddess. In the circles I run in, goddess energy is something that is often referred to. And so, yeah, like, sex magic is not a practice I established. It's been around for many, like thousands of years. But there are practitioners out there who are teaching sex magic. Layla Martin is known as, she's sort of like the tantric sex goddess out there, but she teaches sex magic. And really what it is learning to tap into your energy and have that feminine, sexual, powerful energy, like learn how to harness it in a way that like you're using all of your energy systems, like all of your different chakras, to not only like call in what it is you want, but to really, I want to say, like, shoot out a beacon to where you become really magnetic for the things that you want.
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited about this world because, you know, it's funny you mentioned the word goddess, and I kind of kept thinking about like goddess awakening, like into her true power and essence. And the word goddess, you know, there's a reason that this podcast is called the Goddess Collective. And both the goddess and the word collective are two words that just kind of have been kind of following me, but I didn't like, I've just always felt connected to them. And so when I was thinking about, you know, this podcast and this platform and everything, I was just like, I feel like the reason is going to kind of unfold, and I'm going to start to understand it as I go down this journey, even though I'm like, I like these words and it feels good. And so I'm going to start there, but allowing it to just unfold. And so it doesn't even surprise me that at this point in this journey, I'm now having conversations with people like yourself about sex magic and, you know, pussies and the womb and the magic of it all. And so, so I just had to reflect because that's really cool. But
absolutely. And I will say, like, to tie it back to like visionary plant medicine, I had my only, like, I had a full like Kundalini awakening experience while on plant medicine. And I know that sounds like, I mean, there's a big question mark around like, what is that? I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what was happening to me, but my body like started vibrating. And it was for probably 2 hours, I was shaking in orgasmic energy while in this ayahuasca ceremony. And like, from that place, like I was being shown that we as women, we're kind of taught to like get to the finish line. Like when we're like being intimate with our partners, or even like in self-pleasure practices, we're taught to like, you know, that the climax is the thing, but the power actually exists before the climax. And being able to hold that energy, hold that orgasmic energy, that really, really powerful energy, when you learn to really hold it, that's where your manifestation power comes from. That's where you're really developing a relationship with your pleasure, with your pussy, with goddess. That energy that's our life force energy that flows through us. And so why are we like always trying to like get to that finish line and expel it? Because that is the, you know, we're letting go of the energy, but that's what like people who study like tantric sex, it's really it's learning about how to hold the energy, how to move the energy inside you, and the power that comes from learning how to harness that.
That makes me think of any time I'm working on like balancing my masculine and feminine energies with me. Like I think about how, yes, I want to, complete my tasks. I want to, achieve the things I set out to achieve, but I want to do it in a feminine way. So I'm like, I'm going to move about my day slower, even if that means literally walking slower or just putting more consciousness and intention into the actions that I'm taking. And so that it almost makes me understand that deeper of like, yes, I understand like femininity is very thoughtful and a little bit slower and more just kind of, she knows that it's all, already hers. So she doesn't have to rush, that kind of thing. But it makes me understand like, oh, wait, she's not rushing not only because she knows she doesn't have to, but because she simply wants to soak in that pleasure energy, enjoying the moment, because the moment you hit the thing, you're on to the next thing. So you've got to linger in that pleasure. So now I'm hearing it different, like lingering for another. So that, I don't know if that it makes sense to anybody listening, but that just hit me in a different way of like, not only the why, but the desire behind it.
Oh yeah.
So I'm going to start thinking about things way differently now.
Well, even like you mentioned just sort of like going through your day to day, like things like a lot of people think about femininity as like this very soft, very like pastel colors and florals. And like my relationship to my feminine is actually much more like my feminine energy is much more powerful. Yes, I'm constantly in a practice of slowing down and receiving and going with the flow. But for me, putting on an outfit that like makes me feel beautifully feminine and sexy, and like that inspires me to move my body differently. So when I'm walking down the street, if I'm wearing something that feels particularly feminine and pretty or sexy, I find my hips sway a little more. I find that I stand up straighter, that my like my breasts stick out a little more. Like I carry myself with a different energy. And that to me is like the true essence of what it means to tap into your feminine energy. It doesn't necessarily have to be all about, pretty floral prints and color. It's like I sometimes like wearing like the little black dress is where I find myself feeling the most feminine. Wearing like the knee-high boots, I find myself feeling the most feminine. Yeah. And for me, it's a very powerful feminine. It's a, like I don't know, like I can like strut down the street and get out of my way. Like nothing's going to stop me.
And that's what I love about it is there's no boxing yourself into this definition of what, we hear a lot of society talk about what, being a powerful feminine is, or what divine goddess energy is. Like it gets to be whatever you want because you're connecting with, ooh, what feels good to me in this moment. And I think that's what you're talking about a little bit too, with like being like, pussy led in your decisions. It's like, well, what feels good to me now? And I think actually a powerful like visual, and I cannot remember the name of this goddess, but like the Hindu goddesses, there's so many different ones. And now I'm not the person to talk to about this, but I've looked into it a little bit. But there is one, and I cannot remember her name, but she's like the dark goddess. She's like the, oh my God, whoever's listening and knows this is like screaming at me right now because they're like, they're saying her name and I'm going to remember it later. I
know, it's funny. I'm one of those like, oh, I should know this, but I'm going to say the wrong name. So
oh my gosh. It started, no, I'm getting it wrong, but she's like this dark, like black and blue goddess. She's like the most fierce one, but she's like also one of the most powerful ones. So she looks immediately like I thought she was like evil at first, but when I read about her, I was like, oh, no. She is so powerful that like she's a force. And I saw it so different. I was like, I want to embody her. And I cannot believe I'm forgetting her name, but just seeing that as another idea of like what feminine power can be, right?
Yes. Well, also to cycle this back to like manifestation, something that I learned in the last year that really shifted my perspective on, the power of manifestation really does come down to desire. So desire is that which like you truly, truly want on like your body is telling you want, you desire it versus something that you want because you've been programmed to believe it's what you need to, be worthy. So like a lot of time, and I'm guilty, we're all guilty of this. Like oh, I need to have, the perfect car and the perfect house and the perfect clothes and the perfect, all of these things. Like it has to look this way that, or even like with your body, it's like my body has to look a way that the society has told me that I have to look. But then, so that's a want versus a desire. A desire is something that comes from within. A desire is, oh, I don't know why I'm drawn to this color or this dress or this whatever. It just makes me feel alive and juicy and turned on. And this is like living your life from like your turn on versus living your life from this like cognitive place of desire or of want. There's a distinction there, because like, when we're going after the things we're told we're supposed to have that signify success or signify like you've made it, we find ourselves in the hustle. We find ourselves like muscling our way to get the thing. And like, that's why you hear like money doesn't make you happy, or like getting all those things doesn't make you happy, because we do it from, it's like motivated from the wrong place. And so the women's work is really about tapping into, what is it that you truly desire? Do you want that handbag because you truly want it? Or do you want that handbag because somebody told you that having that handbag means you've made it and you're good enough?
Yeah. So there's another example of why the slowdown, bringing consciousness in and being able to give yourself moments of pause so you can process, because the pause is what allows the growth to catch up with you.
Yeah.
So
and it's our ego that's going to tell us that we need all the things that we don't actually need to make ourselves happy.
Because our ego wants us to be happy, wants us to protect us, but it also wants us to stay small, right? Because that's where it knows we're safe. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you tap into this energy, because something that I really believe is that when I'm in my head too much, I've got to get into my body at some point, because I've been thinking too much and there's some stuck energy going on. And so I've got to get into my body. And when I get into my body, I did a lot of pole dance for a while. I grew up dancing a lot. And so for me, like that's always been where I've personally just felt like time escapes me. But of course, I really don't do it as much anymore. I'm not in the studio as much, but it's just definitely a part of me. So like for me, being able to connect with my body, like just dancing a little bit, is how I do it. And I know you mentioned you do that too, but what are the ways that you tap into that goddess energy a bit?
Oh, I mean, honestly, you just kind of nailed it. Like moving my body, focusing on sensual movement for me is big, because like I can get trapped in my head. I can get trapped in the like do. But if I put on some music that like really like talks to like my sensual side, and as long as I'm moving my body for me and it's not a performative thing, if it's just me, like I sometimes do it just here in my office or in my bedroom, if it's just for me and I'm able to ask myself, like, how do I feel? Like, how do I want to be moving right now? What feels good? And stop thinking about what it looks like. That's when I really feel like I can tap into like my inner goddess energy. And, that's where like, I like to start meditation that way. I first like to get my body moving, connect, and then I'll sit down and like, try to open and focus on my breath, and just see what comes through. For me, it always starts with movement. I'm big into like moving meditation. If I just sit there, if I just try to sit and breathe, I can't seem to like break free from my head, like sending me down the hamster wheel. So
yeah. Yeah, definitely guilty of that too. I find when I'm like, sometimes like I'll be in meditation and I'll feel really good. The state will change for me, but then the clarity and the ideas come like later in the shower when I'm standing or whatever, or I'm like appreciating my body in that moment or whatever, so I get that. So I know we've kind of gone all over the board here. We've really covered some really, I think, fun topics and really only scratched the surface. So I've just loved every ounce of this, because this is subjects that I'm so passionate about too. But before I ask you my last question, I would just love to know, is there any, any words of advice you want to give women who are kind of at this place right now where they're looking to tap in differently, or they're wanting to connect with themselves in a way where they're really getting to to love on themselves different and harness their own energy better, or just, on a up level. Any advice you have for women who are kind of exploring that right now, what you would tell them?
Wow. I mean, honestly, learning to be honest with yourself about your desires, your true desires versus your egoic wants. That would be like, for me, that was the first step of like releasing what I thought my life needed, like should look like, and inviting in what actually feels really good, and aligned. Like that's a really good first step for me. And I know, again, cliche, like I'm going to say gratitude practice, but it's really more of an appreciation practice, learning to appreciate the things that you have in your life, whether it's, learning to appreciate things about your body, your perfectly imperfect body, learning to appreciate not having everything perfect, learning to appreciate the beauty and everything that is, only invites in more beauty of what it is that you want. So instead of creating that dissonance around like, well, here I'm standing here, but I really want to be over here. Stop focusing on that. Focus on the like magic that is right now in this moment. It's all you have. That will get you to where you want to be just by focusing on where you are right now with appreciation, with love, with gratitude, self-love. Be kinder on yourself. Try to soften around the inner dialogue that you have running on repeat, ongoing. Try to tune into that and stop yourself when you start, when that inner critic comes in, when you step on the scale, or when when you're not doing things perfectly. Like, try to soften around that. Give like that little girl inside you a little extra love, and know that she is doing she's exactly where she's meant to be right now.
Oh my gosh, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Honestly, if you've never thought of doing like a motivational video or something, you totally could. I'm inspired to take on the world now.
Oh, yay. That's good.
Thank you so much for everything. You're such a wealth of knowledge. You're such a light in this world, and a powerhouse. And it's an honor to have you here. So thank you so much.
To be here. What a fun little way to spend my midday. Thank you so much, Jessie. And I can't wait to see what's unraveling for you. It's like so exciting to watch.
Thank you. And really quick, where can everybody connect with you? Of course, I've got your information down in the show notes, but is there anywhere that you prefer to connect with people?
I mean, honestly, right now, my main thing that I've got going on is the Divine Feminist. It's www.thedivinefemin.ist. And that is where you will find information about upcoming retreats. Right now, we're pretty much focusing in on doing visionary plant medicine retreats. However, that will expand into more women-centric, goddess-centric, goddess awakening type of retreats and events. So stay tuned for that. I know one of these days, Jessie, you and I are going to be doing something. So that is where I'll keep updating that. My upcoming retreat is May 6th through 9th in Ojai, California. I'm not sure when this is going live. We might have missed that date, but if you're feeling really, really called to join us, there might be opportunity to squeeze you in last minute. So that's it.
So exciting. And I know this will be the first of many retreats. So even if, let's say, somebody's listening to the recording after the fact, there will be more opportunities. So still go check out, Carole's information and her website, and see what other things she has going on, because there's a lot of opportunities, and this is just the beginning. So thank you again so much. Honored. Beyond honored.
Mwah.
Bye.
Bye.